Montana Territory, August 1883, the morning sun hit the town square of Alder Creek like a hammer, bright, hot, and unrelenting. Folks were already gathering near the general store, drawn not by trade or news, but by the sight of a woman left sitting on the edge of the well, her hands folded tight in her lap like she was holding herself together. Her name was Tamsyn Ellar. She wore a faded calico dress, boots caked in dust, and her braided hair was tucked neatly behind her ears. A small carpetbag sat beside her feet. She did not cry, she did not plead. She just sat there staring at the boards beneath her boots like if she looked up she might fall apart. Behind her, the doors of the church were shut. That was where her husband's family had made it clear they were done. 6 years of marriage and no child came, not a single one, not even a sign. And now he had taken up with a younger girl from Bozeman, and the town, already half whispering for years, had turned its eyes away. She cannot give life, her mother-in-law had said, loud enough for anyone to hear. What good is she to a man, so they left her, in the square. Like a sack of spoiled grain, and no one did a thing. Until a tall man with a battered hat and a scar running across his left cheek rode in from the southern trail just past midday. He dismounted slow, dusted off his sleeves. His horse, a stocky bay mare, stood calm as he walked right into the middle of the square. Eyes locked on Tamsyn like he had been looking for her all along. His name was Quillan Ashford. He was not from Alder Creek. His coat was dusty from long travel, and the rifle at his side looked like it had seen its share of trouble. He had a quiet way about him, like a man who had seen too much and said too little. He looked around once. The townsfolk watched from under their awnings, pretending not to, but not fooling anyone. Tamsyn slowly raised her eyes to meet his. "You left here by choice?" Quillan asked, his voice low. She shook her head. He nodded once. "Then I will take you as my bride." Tamsyn blinked. "What? I came here for supplies. Found something more important." He looked at her, really looked. "If you want to stand, I will walk you out of here. If you want to stay, I will sit beside you." She stared at him like he had spoken a foreign tongue. A woman in the crowd scoffed. "She is barren." "You will not get an heir from her." Quillan turned his head slowly. "I did not ask for one." He held out his hand. Tamsyn looked at it, then at the people watching, whispering, then back at him. "I do not know you," she said. "You will," he said. "If you want to." She stood. Her legs trembled, but she stood. Quillan picked up her carpetbag and led her to his horse. He helped her mount and swung up behind her, arms steady, not too close. Just enough. They left Alder Creek without a word more. They stopped that night at a small creek an hour's ride south. The fire crackled between them. Tamsyn sat wrapped in a blanket, knees pulled to her chest. Quillan sliced a bit of jerky and handed it over. "Not much, but it is better than nothing." She took it, but did not eat. "I am not some lost lamb to be pitied," she said quietly. His eyes did not flinch. "I know. I did not ask you to take me, I know." She looked at him for a long while. "Why did you?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because you were left behind like you were nothing, and I know what that feels like." Silence fell again between them, but this time it was not sharp. It was soft, settling. "I do not have anything to offer," she said. Quillan's voice was calm. "Neither do I." By the fourth day they had reached Quillan's land, tucked between the pine ridges near the Bitterroot Mountains. A cabin stood strong against the wind, smoke curling from its chimney. 2 children ran out the front door as the horse approached, a girl of about 7 and a boy just past 5. "Papa," they cried. Tamsyn froze. Quillan dismounted and swung the boy up into his arms. "You two behave for Miss Dottie." The older woman on the porch waved from the rocking chair. "They ran me ragged, as always." Tamsyn stayed still on the horse. Quillan reached up. "Come down, please." She slid off slow, eyes on the children. "They are not mine," Quillan said quietly beside her. "Their ma was a girl I once knew. She died 3 winters ago. Her people did not want them." He looked at her gently. "But I did." Tamsyn's hand trembled at her side. The girl approached, looking up with wide eyes. "Are you going to stay?" the girl asked. Tamsyn crouched down, brushing hair from the child's cheek. "I think I might," she said softly. Quillan watched her, something eased in his shoulders. Tamsyn looked up at him. "They are lucky. You saved them?" "I did not save them," he said. "We just found each other." She reached for his hand, and for the first time in years, Tamsyn smiled. Tamsyn rose early the next morning, well before the sun had crested the ridge. The cabin was quiet, the children still curled beneath their quilts in the loft above. She moved softly, careful not to wake them, and stepped outside into the cold breath of dawn. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. A frost silvered the grass, brittle under her boots. She walked past the stacked woodpile and stood at the edge of the clearing where the trees gathered thick and tall. A hawk wheeled overhead, its cry sharp in the stillness. Behind her, the door creaked. "You always wake with the dark?" Quillan asked, his coat pulled over his shirt, boots unlaced. She kept her eyes on the trees. "I've never slept well in strange places." He stepped beside her, not too close. "You won't find many strangers here." "I meant the land," he nodded once, quiet. She turned to him. "You don't ask me questions." "I will when I know you want them." Tamsyn studied his face, the lines etched deep around his mouth, the way his gaze never pressed but never drifted. "You built that cabin yourself, me and a man named Lyle," he said. "He was older, lost a leg fighting for the Union. We split the work. He died 2 winters back. Heart gave out while chopping kindling." She looked down at her hands. "I never built anything." Quillan's voice was even. "You cooked, cleaned, nursed your husband's father through a fever. You stayed quiet when you were blamed for things that weren't your fault. That's building too, just not with timber." She said nothing for a long while, then turned back toward the cabin. "I can cook breakfast. You don't have to, I know." Inside, the girl Ellie was awake, sitting cross-legged at the hearth, brushing a ragged doll's yarn hair. The boy, Jonah, still slept. Tamsyn knelt beside the stove and began coaxing flame from kindling. Her hands moved with practiced ease. She didn't speak until Ellie set the doll aside and crawled closer. "You know how to make biscuits?" the child asked. "Yes." "Can you show me?" Tamsyn paused, then nodded. "After we grind the flour." "There's a grinder outside near the lean-to." Ellie beamed and ran to fetch her boots. Later, while the dough rose near the warmth of the stove, Quillan stepped in, arms full of chopped wood. He set it by the hearth and glanced toward the girl, who was now kneading a second batch with more enthusiasm than skill. "She's taken to you quick. She reminds me of my niece," Tamsyn said, brushing flour from her sleeves. "Same stubborn chin. You have family?" "Not anymore." He didn't press. After breakfast, Quillan hitched the wagon and loaded the children in back with a quilt and 2 small baskets. "We'll head to the south meadow. Fence needs mending." Tamsyn hesitated. "You want me to come?" "I want you to choose." She climbed up beside him. The ride was slow, wheels creaking, the mare steady and sure. The south meadow opened wide beyond a bend in the creek, its edge lined with split-rail fencing, some posts leaning, others broken clean through. While the children gathered wildflowers and played near the stream, Quillan handed Tamsyn a hammer and a pouch of nails. She took them without comment. They worked in tandem, hardly speaking. The rhythm of their labor filled the space between them, wood groaning, nails driven deep, sun warming their backs. When they paused for water, Quillan passed her the canteen. "You know how to use a rifle?" he asked. "I was taught. My father believed in being prepared. I'll lay a target behind the barn. You can practice if you want." She nodded once, thoughtful. That night, after the children had gone to bed and Dottie had returned to her own cabin down the hill, Tamsyn sat by the hearth sewing a tear in Jonah's shirt. Quillan sat on the floor nearby, oiling his saddle. "You spoke of building," she said, keeping her eyes on the needle. "I don't know what you want from me. I want you to feel safe. That's not the same as being wanted." "No," he said softly, "but it's where it begins." She set the shirt aside. "What if I never feel safe?" "Then I'll keep trying," he said, not looking up. "As long as it takes." The fire crackled between them, low and steady. Tamsyn stood and crossed the room. She sat down beside him, close this time, her shoulder brushing his. He didn't move. "I want to try," she said. He met her gaze. "Then we will." The first snow came early, dry and thin, scattered like sifted flour across the thatch of the roof and the long grasses beyond the barn. Tamsyn stood at the window with Ellie on her hip, the girl's small fingers pressed to the glass. "Think it'll stick?" Ellie asked. "Not yet." "But soon." Behind them, Jonah arranged pine cones in a crooked line along the hearthstones, humming low under his breath. Quillan had gone to the far pasture before sunup to check the fencing near the gulch. He'd taken the rifle with him not out of fear, but habit. Tamsyn had started to understand the rhythm of his days, the way he moved through the world with quiet purpose, never wasting a step. She set Ellie down and grabbed her shawl from the peg. "I'll fetch the eggs. Stay inside." Jonah didn't look up. "Dottie said a weasel got the red hen last week." "Papa said he'd fix the holes." "He will," Tamsyn said. "But until then, I'll keep watch." Out in the yard, the wind had teeth. The chicken coop stood half-shadowed beneath a pair of spruce trees, its boards patched and leaning. Tamsyn crouched low, reached in beneath the roosting box, and came up with 4 warm eggs. When she turned, Quillan was walking up the slope, a small limp in his right leg she hadn't noticed before. His coat flapped open at the hem, and his gloves were tucked into his belt. "You're favoring that leg," she said. He looked down at it like he'd forgotten. "Old break. Took a bad fall on shale near Fort Benton, comes back when the cold sets in. You should rest it." He smiled faintly. "You offering to mend fence for me, if you show me how." They walked back toward the cabin together, boots scuffing through thin snow. He paused at the porch, eyes tracing the smoke rising from the chimney. "You kept the fire steady. I've kept worse things alive." He glanced at her, the line of his jaw softening. "I know." Inside, he scraped the frost from his boots while she cracked eggs into the skillet. The scent of hot lard filled the room. Jonah handed him a pine cone wrapped in a strip of cloth. "It's a soldier," he said. Ellie made him a hat. Quillan crouched to take it. "Fine work, he'll guard the door tonight." Ellie beamed. "He needs a name." Tamsyn stirred the eggs without turning. "Call him Lyle." Quillan stood slowly. That'd suit him. After supper, she stepped out to the porch alone. The sky had gone deep blue, stars sharp and cold above the pines. She leaned on the rail, listening to the hush of wind in the branches. Quillan joined her a few minutes later, his coat wrapped snug, a tin mug in his hands. He didn't speak right away. "You've changed the room," he said finally. "I moved the cot to the wall, felt more open that way." He nodded. "Jonah said you told him stories about the sea." "My father was a shipwright before he came west. I never saw the ocean, only his drawings. But I remember the way he spoke about it." Quillan sipped his drink. "I've never seen it either. Closest I got was Salt Lake." She pulled her shawl tighter. "I used to think I'd go someday. You still could." "I don't dream like that anymore." He set the mug on the rail. "You should." "Not everything has to stay lost." She turned to face him. "I don't know how to be someone new." "You don't have to be." She searched his face. "Then what am I here?" He didn't look away. "You're needed, you're wanted. That's not new, it just wasn't seen before." Her breath caught. She stepped back inside before she could say something foolish. That night, once the children were asleep, she laid a quilt over the couch and turned down the lamp. Quillan stood by the door, hands loose at his sides. "I'll ride to the mill tomorrow," he said. "Storm's coming. I'll bring back salt and lamp oil. Take the mare, she's sure-footed." "You trust me with her." "I trust you with more than that." He nodded. "You'll be all right here." "I always am." She reached for the lamp wick, but he stepped forward first, his fingers brushing hers as he turned the flame low. The room settled into warmth and shadow. Neither of them spoke again that night. But something passed between them in that quiet unspoken, steady and real. And in the hush that followed, Tamsyn slept without waking. The wind came in hard from the north 2 days later, bending the treetops and scouring the ridgelines with dry snow that didn't melt. Tamsyn stood in the root cellar, lantern swinging above her as she checked the last of the smoked meat. The scent of dried apple peel and damp soil clung to the air. She'd kept her hands busy since Quillan left for the mill, mending, storing, boiling water for the wash, but her mind kept circling back to the road. When she climbed the ladder and pushed open the trapdoor, the cold bit at her face sharp. The sun had sunk low behind the trees, painting the snow a dull blue-gray. Dottie had come by midday and stayed on, keeping the children inside with games and a pot of stew that now simmered on the stove. Tamsyn brushed her palms on her apron and stepped out into the yard. The barn door groaned open and she slipped inside. The mare stood in her stall, ears twitching. Tamsyn ran a hand down her neck. "Did he feed you before he left, or am I doing it twice again?" The horse blinked slowly, pressing her muzzle into Tamsyn's shoulder. She carried out an armful of hay, then checked the saddle tack. Quillan had taken a pack saddle, not the wagon. He wouldn't risk the wagon on icy ground unless he had no choice. "Tamsyn," Dottie's voice called from the porch. "Someone's coming down the trail." She strode out, skirts dragging through the snow. The shape on the road was broad-shouldered and upright, leading a pack mule behind him. Quillan's hat was pulled low, his coat stiff with frost, his boots crunched to a stop near the woodpile. He looked up and met her eyes. "You're late," she said. "I stopped at the Larkins' place. Their eldest broke his arm, no one else could get to town." She reached for the mule's lead. "You brought flour?" "Also coffee and a bolt of muslin." "Thought you might want to make something for yourself." She ran a hand across the bundled cloth. "You remembered what I said. You said you'd need thread and a sharp needle. I brought both." He stepped forward and unbuckled the straps. His hands were raw, knuckles red. "You need to soak those," she said. "Hot water and wrapped linen. I've had worse. I'm not asking if you've had worse. I'm telling you what I'll do." He paused, then nodded once. "All right." Inside, the children rushed to him, pelting him with questions. He answered what he could, then sat while Tamsyn poured hot water into a basin and knelt to tend his hands. The room was quiet save for the pop of the fire and the scrape of the cloth against skin. "Your mother," he said quietly. "What was she like?" She kept her eyes on his hands. "Tall, blunt. She could gut a fish before she'd even said good morning. She wasn't kind in the usual way, but when I was sick as a girl, she stayed beside me for 6 days straight, didn't sleep, just sat and kept my hair out of my face." "Sounds like the kind of woman who didn't waste breath," he said. "She believed in showing someone they mattered, not telling them." She looked up. "That's why I stayed when you asked me." His brow furrowed slightly. "You didn't know me." "I knew you didn't lie." He held her gaze. "And now," she wrung the cloth and set it aside. "Now I know you carry more than you let on, and I know you leave people better than you found them." He looked down at his bandaged hands, flexed his fingers once. "You've been carrying things too, quietly." "I learned early that tears don't change anything. Work does." Quillan stood slowly. "Come outside." She hesitated, then followed. The snow had stopped and the moon hung low behind the clouds. He led her to the side of the barn where the woodshed leaned slightly, its roof half collapsed. "I want to build a second room," he said, "off the east wall. So you don't have to sleep on the cot anymore." She folded her arms. "I never asked for that." "You didn't have to." She studied the rough outline he'd drawn in the snow with his boot heel. "You think we'll need more space?" "I think we already do." She tilted her face toward him. "I thought you said you weren't looking for more." "I wasn't," he said. "But I found it." She reached out and took his hand, the bandages rough beneath her fingers. He didn't pull away. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I know." They stood in the snow, their breath mingling in the cold, the air between them steady and warm. In the cabin, Ellie's voice rose in song, off-key but bright. Tamsyn smiled faintly. "You're building a life here," she said. Quillan looked down at her. "Not alone." The first thaw came in early March, slow and heavy, turning the packed snow to slush and loosening the earth beneath the cabin's foundation. Water trickled down from the ridge and pooled along the southern edge of the pasture, seeping into the furrows Quillan had plowed weeks before. The fields would need mending come spring, and the old fence posts by the creek had half rotted where they touched the ground. Tamsyn stood knee-deep in mud. Sleeves rolled past her elbows as she guided the mule through the thick mire toward the toolshed. The beast balked at the soft ground, but she steadied it with a calm hand to its flank and a low, even voice. When they reached the firmer gravel path, she exhaled and rubbed her arm across her brow. Behind her, the door creaked open. "You shouldn't be hauling alone," Quillan said, stepping down into the yard. "I'm not hauling," she said. "I'm leading. The hauling's his job." He nodded toward the bundle of apple saplings tied to the mule's pack. "You still plan to plant those, 6 of them, near the fence. The rest I'll trade with the Brannocks for seed potatoes. You've already spoken with them?" "I met their eldest while dropping off the cloth you brought back. He said their ground's too rocky for trees." Quillan walked beside her, boots squelching. "You've been making plans. I don't want to spend another winter storing more than we grow. You think you'll still be here by then?" Tamsyn stopped walking. "Do you think I won't?" He met her eyes. "I think you're already rooted deeper than you realize." That night, while Ellie and Jonah piled scraps of wool into shapes on the floor, Tamsyn sat at the table cutting strips of muslin. She stitched with quick, practiced fingers, her thread moving in a clean line. Quillan stepped in from the barn and paused at the threshold, watching her work. "What's it going to be?" he asked. "A dress," she said. "For Ellie." He leaned against the door frame. "You work fast." "I used to sew for the preacher's wife back in Virginia. She'd bring me bolts of linen and expect them back stitched and hemmed by week's end." He crossed to the hearth and crouched beside Jonah, who was now arranging the wool into the shape of a horse. "You miss it?" he asked. "Virginia?" "No, the way your hands were used." "For more than fixing what others broke." She looked down at the muslin. "I think I'm finding new work for them." The next morning, Quillan led her out to the back slope where the ground had drained faster. He carried a spade and a sack of seed, his coat half-buttoned against the breeze. "I thought we'd start here," he said, "so the children can see it from the porch." She took the spade from his hands. "You planning to stand there and watch me dig?" "I was hoping to be permitted to help." They worked side by side, turning the soil while the sun slowly lifted through the clouds. By midday, they'd laid out neat rows, and Tamsyn had cut notches in the dirt with the heel of her boot. As they knelt together, pressing the saplings into the ground, she asked, "Why did you never remarry after their mother died?" He brushed soil over a root ball. "I didn't want to bring anyone here unless I knew they'd stay." She paused. "And now, I know." He stood and reached for her hand, drawing her up beside him. "I've never offered anything with certainty before, but I'm offering it now. If you want this land, this home, these children, I'll give you all of it. Not because you need it, because I want you to have it." Her eyes welled, but she didn't look away. "I never thought anyone would ask me that way, with nothing held back." He brought her hand to his chest. "I don't want to hold anything back." Ellie's voice rang out from the porch. "Papa, Tamsyn, come see." They walked back together, hand in hand, as the girl pointed to a bird's nest tucked into the corner beam above the porch. "There's eggs," she shouted. Tamsyn smiled. "Spring's coming early this year." That evening, with the sun sinking low and the children asleep upstairs, Tamsyn stepped onto the porch, her shawl pulled tight. Quillan followed moments later, a folded paper in his hand. "I sent this with the mill wagon," he said. "It's from the circuit judge out of Missoula. He'll be riding through next week." She glanced at the paper, then up at him. "You're sure?" "I want to marry you in the open air with the children there. I want the neighbors to see it and know, not because it's proper, but because it's true." She reached for him, her palm resting against his cheek. "I'll say yes," she said. "I want this life, I want you." He bent his head and kissed her. In the still hush of dusk, with the trees whispering above the roof and the last frost melting from the grass, their breath mingled in the soft air, and the world settled into its new shape. 3 months later, the garden bloomed in full rose. The apple saplings had taken root, their leaves bright and green. Ellie wore the muslin dress with a wide sash tied at her back, and Jonah stood proudly beside Quillan, holding the wedding ring in a carved wooden box. They married beneath the tall spruce near the barn, with Dottie weeping quietly and half the neighbors gathered round. Afterward, they danced barefoot in the grass while the children chased each other through the rows of beans and early squash. As the sun dipped low behind the pines, Tamsyn stood with her arms around Quillan's waist, her head resting against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd belong anywhere again," she whispered. "You were always meant to," he said, holding her close. And as the stars blinked into being and the cabin lights glowed warm behind them, there was no question left unanswered, no wound left raw. They had found each other through quiet steadiness and stayed by choice, not need. Their life was not loud, but it was whole, and it was theirs.